Hi, my name is Joyce Zhao, and I serve with Crew. I have lived in California, Hawaii, Japan, South Korea, and Singapore. And the reason why I tell you this is because it affects what I study specifically. And the workshop that I did was called From Pollution to Purity, the Restoration of the Hemorrhaging Woman. And the story is found in all three of the Synoptic Gospels, but the one I focus on is Mark 5. And so in the story, we focus on why this woman was outcasted. She had a hemorrhage for 12 years, and because of this, according to Levitical laws in Leviticus 15, she could not be anywhere near any of the normal people. Anything she sat on, anything she touched, anyone who talked to her, anyone who touched her was considered impure. And this woman lived in this condition, outcasted, away from her community for 12 years. And in order for any woman who suffers or who endures the menstruation period, the purity laws had to be enforced so that after 7 days of cleanliness, then they would go and offer 2 turtle doves. And so that was the way that they were declared pure. But the reason for all of these purification laws was because of God setting the people of Israel aside for himself and saying, "You shall be my people, and you shall set yourselves apart. You shall be holy because I am holy." And because God set those things apart, the people enforced the purity laws, and the woman could not be anywhere near the community. So she was outcasted, and she had nowhere to go. And so in the workshop, we discussed what pollution looks like in different contexts, and we discussed what purity looks like, and we also looked at examples of what it looks like for restoration. So when this hemorrhaging woman heard about Jesus, she did a very Asian thing. She didn't even stand up. She didn't try to bring herself to the front of the crowd. She just snuck in there, and she just said, "If I just reach out and touch him, I don't want to be a bother to anybody. I don't want to make a big fuss. I just want to touch him and I just want to be healed." This woman was desperate because she spent 12 years, her whole life savings. None of the doctors could fix her. They couldn't heal her, and she was desperate. So she finally reaches this point where here comes Jesus. "I just want to be healed." And she reaches out to him, and suddenly she's healed. But the story doesn't stop there. Jesus stops her. He stops himself, and he said, "Who touched me?" And that instills a lot of fear into this woman because she'd been an outcast. She was not supposed to be near anybody because she was an outcast. But knowing that she had been healed, she brought herself forward, and she declared that Jesus had healed her. And so in the workshop, we discussed different examples of how Jesus' healing power can heal us, not only physically, but also in terms of restoring our relationships. How one act of faith, just by reaching out to Jesus, can restore us physically, but also he can restore us to our communities. Because this woman lived in 12 years of shame. She could not even be acknowledged. People would laugh at her, people would ignore her. And especially in Asian context, if you're considered an outcast, if you're considered different, especially in collectivist societies and cultures, people will just avoid you. They'll avert their eyes, and they just don't even want to be associated with you. But in the example of this woman, Jesus said, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace." And when he called her daughter, he restored her to the community. And he bestowed on her his honored name by saying, "You are my family." And so when we look at this, how Jesus can restore people who have been polluted, who are considered outcasts, we see how Jesus can restore our relationships and how he can restore us to a relationship with God, but also a relationship with our community.